This webinar is courtesy of Greater Seattle Export Accelerator program, which I've been the program director for and the lead international trade specialist working with businesses in Pierce, King, and Snohomish County for the last 3 years. And we've got Miller Nash Law Firm with Dino Vasquez.
My name is Dino Vasquez. I'm the international trade partner at Miller Nash. I've been practicing for almost 40 years, and we are in interesting times with these tariffs.
I'm going to say that the reason we did this program and we're talking about tariff is because of the current recent political developments involving tariffs, changing U.S. trade policy, and it looks like we may be stuck with some interesting experiences in this arena, which is going to affect both import and export of goods. So today, Dino will start off here in just a moment, but we'll be covering tariff basics, allocation of tariff payments, then some of the best practices of lowering, delaying, or eliminating tariff duties. Follow up with that, additional methods to consider for managing tariffs. We're going to talk about, you may be familiar with this too, but just review quickly how foreign suppliers try to dodge U.S. tariffs. And then we'll have some time left for important questions and answers for U.S. participants. Dino, why don't you go ahead and I'll move the slides as directed.
Sure. There's a couple of importation methods to extract money from goods that come into the country. One is tariffs and the others are duties. The import duty can be things like the customs, excise. Done a lot of work on anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties. Those things usually go hand in hand. Those are taxes or duties on certain goods which the government believes is being dumped into the market, and hand in hand with that is usually the allegation that these goods are receiving foreign government subsidies. These are different than tariffs, which are tax imposed really on goods entering into the country from abroad. Theoretically, they've been used to protect domestic producers by making imported goods from abroad more expensive. And now more frequently what you're seeing is they're being used as a negotiating tool for international trade agreements, and they are a source of income for the government. But the real question is, who is paying this source of income for the government? By the way, if there's any questions, feel free to interrupt and ask questions, because we want to make this as interactive as possible. So there are different types of tariffs. Tariffs are usually characterized by function, but tariffs are based on certain types of categories. The ad valorem tariffs are based on declared value. So if you have $50,000 worth of product, which includes not only the value of the goods itself, but shipping costs and those other kind of things, freight forwarding costs, the tariffs are based upon that total cost. Now, specific tariffs, you're talking about tariffs that are primarily focused on commodities and agricultural and industrial products. You see a lot of them on alcohol and things like that coming into the country. It's based upon weight or volume. A liter of whiskey will be X number of dollars, and that will be subject to a tariff based upon the liter of volume. Then compound tariffs, this is what happens. That's what's happening now because you're seeing a lot of different tariffs involved. You're seeing these 232 tariffs, you're seeing these IEEPA tariffs, and they all add up. The 301 tariffs, they all add up. And you have to be conscious of what all the applicable tariffs are and how they apply to your product, because they become very complicated, especially with these 232 tariffs. Go ahead, Vern, next one. For example, the 301 tariffs are tariffs levied against countries for perceived violations. Currently, there's only China and its territories that are subject to 301 tariffs. This is probably ranging from 7.5 to 25%, depending upon the type of product involved. The other current 301 tariff is the tariff against Brazil, and that was Yeah, that's a retaliatory tariff against Brazil, unfortunately, but we're not sure how that's actually going to work out. That's at 40% at this time. The 301 tariff involves the U.S. Trade Representative looking at imports from certain countries that they believe are not trading fairly with the U.S. And they send out a request for public comment on the 301s. And then after public comment, the U.S. Trade Representative levies or determines what the tariffs are. Now, the IEEPA is a tariff that has been used just recently this year, and it's based on national emergency declaration. The Trump administration has determined that fentanyl coming across the border from Mexico and the U.S. and from China are subject to IEEPA tariffs. This is interesting because this is currently in litigation in the court. The U.S. Court of Appeals has just ruled that those IEEPA tariffs are not legal because the IEEPA statute itself does not authorize tariffs as a means to prevent against declaration of national emergency. There are other methods to do it, and there are other ways to establish tariffs like the 301 and the 232s that specifically allow for tariffs. IEEPA doesn't. It's going to go up to the Supreme Court. We will see in the next little while where the Supreme Court comes down on this. Now, the basic way, I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with this, but the basic way to determine what your tariff schedule is by looking at the harmonized tariff schedule. The thing about the HTS is that it's used commonly around the world. Everybody uses the same kind of trade or product classification. The thing about the HTS is it's changing very frequently because of the new tariff rates and the types of tariffs coming up. So there are, I think Vern has a link on here to the actual HTS. You can take a look at it. I know most companies, they rely on their broker to make a determination on what categories their products fall under the HTS. It shows you what the reciprocal tariffs are, the additional other tariffs, shows you what countries are subject to these tariffs, and there's a bunch of subcategories of these products. So it's really important for people importing product into the country to make sure that their classification is correct. If not, you could be subject to more tariffs than you really are obligated to pay, or you could be mischaracterizing your product and subject to higher tariffs. And CBP will evaluate that and take a look at that, and they make a big deal out of it if it's not characterized properly. Okay, next slide, Vern. This is how the chart looks. Basically, the subheadings and the headings are on the left, and the descriptions of the articles are in the middle. And then it shows you the rates of duties. There are some special duties that apply, and it shows you the percentage of these duties. And it's a little bit confusing unless you've actually used this schedule frequently. But once you get a chance to look at it and kind of work through it, it's relatively simple to actually work with. But like I said, it's really important for you to know what your actual product is classified as. Okay, go ahead. This is the real issue. Most consumers don't understand who pays for tariffs, and when the administration says that it's received $1 trillion in tariffs, what people don't understand is that's on top of the tariffs they've already received. That's not on top of the tariffs that they've already received in the past. So it's $1 trillion total tariffs. Last year, there was about $1 billion, $2 billion worth of tariffs. And on top of that, we're now getting another few $billion in additional tariffs based on the new tariffs that were enacted this year. It's not the exporters or it's not the manufacturers or producers that pay these tariffs, because these tariffs are paid upon entry into the country. And it's the importers of record that are responsible for paying these tariffs. Most of you guys who have businesses here understand that you're the ones paying the tariffs, and the choice is, do you pass it off onto your customers, or do you absorb those tariffs and just hope that trade deals are going to be negotiated and met, and you can readjust or reclassify the price of your goods at that point. So that's the real issue with tariffs and who gets to pay them. So there are certain exemptions and special treatments for tariffs. For example, the personal use exemption. Although the personal use exemption was really helpful when you were exempt from de minimis tariff payments, now that's out the door. So every product that comes into the country, even if it's $800 or less, is now subject to tariffs. Charitable relief imports, usually aligned with disaster relief aid, things like that. Temporary imports, the TIB, is basically when you're bringing a product into the country temporarily and you are exporting that product out within a certain period of time. You don't pay the tariffs, but you have to supply a bond to CBP for the value of those products, which is redeemable at the time you re-export those products. Countries where you have trade agreements, for example, AGOA, that's the African countries. Most of the goods from there are apparel and those kind of materials. They're subject to the trade exemption, and you have to go look at the actual trade agreement to see what the specifications are. Certain apparel products, even though materials come from other countries, if they're manufactured in the African country, then exported here, they would be subject to the exemption. The other one is, of course, the USMCA exemption. Probably 98% of goods coming from Canada are subject to that. And even though there are fentanyl tariffs assigned to Mexico, Canada, and China, if you are bringing in a product that is compliant with the USMCA, you are exempt from paying that particular duty or tariff. So important to know if your products come from any of those countries, whether they're exempt or not. Go ahead, Vern. It is really important to know if your company is doing a lot of international trade, about understanding the allocation of tariff payments. I've had a lot of clients come to me, importers, who are talking about or requesting specific terms and conditions in their contracts, either to ultimate purchasers or to their producers in the foreign countries, about ways to deal with fluctuating and variable tariffs. And we put into place terms and conditions which basically say, if tariffs change, X individual is still responsible for paying those tariffs, even if those tariffs are put into place after the transaction or after the purchase has been put in place. I've yet to see how those terms and conditions are going to be played out. I think many of you have already seen them in your agreements, and there's probably some disputes going on about how to apply those. There are various ways to try and attack those, but really they're pretty enforceable and really efficient or effective ways of trying to deal with the variability of tariffs. Okay, next slide, Vern. Again, this is where we're talking about the terms and conditions, how to deal with some of these issues. So essentially, you have three basic options. You pay it and absorb the loss. You try and renegotiate the price with your supplier, or you pass the tariffs on to your customers. Further on in the slides, you'll see various kind of methods or strategies to try and deal with tariffs from the initiation of the manufacturing of the product, and trying to move products or move manufacture to different areas of the world which have different tariff agreements. So those are some of the other things that we can think about, but we'll talk about that later on down in our presentation. Go ahead, Vern. As I said, that IEEPA litigation is ongoing. There are additional lawsuits going on. The Court of Appeals has said that tariffs are illegal. Interestingly enough, they left those tariffs in place in the meantime while the administration seeks a ruling from the Supreme Court. Currently, they're all still in place. What you'll see is reciprocal tariffs, the Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, Section 232 on auto and auto parts, and fentanyl tariffs, the Chinese 301 tariffs, and Brazil's 40% IEEPA tariffs. So those are still in place while litigation is ongoing. But also, deals are currently being negotiated right now. The UK has gotten an exemption for some of the auto and steel parts. And that was, I think, in place on August 1st. We'll see what other kind of deals are going on and happening. Okay.
Thanks for getting us started. And there's just some really good understanding that he's shared about basics on tariffs. We're going to talk now about there's 10 basic strategies. Some of them, 4 of them deal with lowering or delaying tariffs, as you see on the slide. First sale rule for valuation methods, bonded warehouse, and free trade zones. And then there's ways to eliminate tariffs, but these are not always permanent. The first 2 are not. ATA carnet, items for display or demo. That's not meaning items for sale. Temporary import under bond, that's TIB, we talked a little bit about. Depends where it's going and where it's sitting and how you manage the documentation. Of course, the harmonized tariff classification engineering is a way to make a difference in the code if it works out for what you're doing in terms of your bill of materials and your actual manufacturing process. Country of origin is always important because that's what the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol looks at. Border protection when it comes into the country, and free trade agreements that are still in place, but we've had the current tariffs that Dino talked about layered on top of that. So going into first sale rule, if some of you in our audience today are importing products or items that are later put into an assembly or put into another product and eventually sold domestically and or exported, then you may be familiar with this first sale rule opportunity. In transactions where there's at least one middleman, it allows the U.S. importer to use the value of the first sale between the manufacturer and the middleman rather than the sale of the middleman to the importer as a proper customs valuation on import entry. So that way you can reduce the obligation because the value duty is now lower. The value must be at arm's length distance. It must be a bona fide sale and goods must be clearly destined to the U.S. So there are some requirements. In this slide, there is a link there that you'll receive this. You can click on that with a control click and it'll take you to the publication from the U.S. government regarding how first sale rule works. I think this is like a 9-page document. I also took the opportunity to provide that as a PDF that I shared with Kirk Davis. He will be sharing that with you after this presentation. So if you want to see a PDF of it and you want to put it in a binder, if it has value for you to keep as a reference item, it will be coming your way. Again, proper valuation methods and Incoterms. There are 6 methods of proper valuation on a commercial invoice. When using the transaction value method, ensure that certain charges are excluded from the customs dutiable value, freight, insurance, buying commissions, inspection fees, and so forth. Depending on the Incoterms negotiated, your price may include some non-dutiable costs if broken out separately on commercial invoice. Now, if you're familiar with this and you've done valuation, you may know the rules and regulations. Again, there's a link here at the bottom of this slide that you can click on, a control click, and there'll be a document coming your way that shares more detail. Again, it's the If you've got experience, it's helpful and it can be rewarding for what you're doing in terms of import and export. But if it's new to you, highly recommend that you go through the document, understand, or even get other support or information from someone who might know more about it for you. There's always questions that arise. Again, bonded warehouse. There's 11 different types of bonded warehouses, and only about 6 of them are really of value in this story here. The bonded warehouse, and finding the right warehouse can be a challenge depending on your product. So if some of you are already using bonded warehouses, good for you and congratulations, and hopefully that's working well. Again, it's a way to store goods for up to 5 years and delay the duties. In some cases, the goods can be exported from the bonded warehouse without paying any US duties at all, but again, it's conditional. And there is a government website as well as a document that's available to share how that works, what has to be filed, and what the conditions are. Foreign trade zones, sometimes called free trade zones, FTZ, they're a longer term approach. And you can, if you have a operation inside of a free trade zone or foreign trade zone, the benefits can range from duty deferral, duty elimination, inverted tariff relief, tax exemptions, and no time constraints may be involved, as well as lower insurance costs. Not everybody gets access to or understands free trade zones, and it depends what you're doing and where they're at. There are some initial costs, outlays. I don't know why there's misspelling of cost there, but it can take up to 1 year to implement. You usually need more robust record keeping, inventory management systems, and may even take part of a building or a subzone inside of the free trade zone for a warehouse. It's not something you can plug and play right away, but if you have the long-term opportunity and you know you're going to be doing this over a period of time, it can make sense. And the United States has a number of free trade zones. Washington State has a number of free trade zones. And again, there's a click through on the bottom of this slide to let you understand more about the details and how it's involved. And there will be a document coming your way if you'd like to learn more. Eliminating import tariff duties. Again, we're going to talk about ATA, Carnet, real quick, temporary TIB under bond, importation under bond, and the classification that we mentioned earlier, US goods return, country of origin, and free trade agreements. And they all have their conditions and regulations. So if any of you have been involved as a manufacturer where you've gone to another country and you've got your product in a trade show, or you've got some type of opportunity to demo your product or your system, and you don't want to pay duties on it, you can obtain an ATA Carnet that allows you to bring that product in and take it back out without paying duty on it. There's also other regulations that are involved too. You may be experienced with this or may have done it already, which is great. It's always important to follow the actual guidelines. Some of these goods can stay for up to a year. Sometimes I've also seen companies involved in trade shows where they'll take the product over of the samples, and depending on the nature of the product or the value of the product, they may just give them away, or they may just leave them there for destruction. There's ways to do that. When it comes to temporary importation under bond, it allows you to import certain types of goods into the US duty-free on a temporary basis for ultimately up to 3 years. But the Customs and Border Protection Port Director has to approve it. And again, both these activities require conditions, documentation, the proper paperwork, and there's a click-through link, and there's also information available that's going to be coming your way in terms of a PDF. Eliminating duties, again, you can use classification system engineering or harmonized tariff, making that easier if it's possible. If you've got good engineering in your business, or you're familiar with what you're trying to do with the product, you can re-engineer sometimes a product that gives it another or a different harmonized tariff code classification. I'll make this statement here. If someone's bringing an imported product in and you've got a good relationship with the supplier or the manufacturer in a foreign country that you're getting the parts for, that may be possible, that may not be possible, particularly if you have to use them for assembly to make another item here in the US. If you're an exporter and you're making products that's going into a foreign market, you may be able to make the changes with your harmonized tariff code, but that would be Schedule B harmonized tariff code. Schedule B is for exports only. Some of you already know that, but I just thought I would bring it up. And then as Dino Vasquez said earlier, we have free trade agreements in place. And the Canada-Mexico free trade agreement, Mexico-Canada free trade agreement is helpful. There's ones with Africa, South Korea, other countries. So those can give you benefits. The 14 free trade agreements covering 20 countries. And that can be looked into. Again, there is a click through here for free trade agreement listings and information if one wants to look into that. If the U.S. goods are being returned, the actual goods for U.S. origins that are returned to the U.S. within 3 years have not been, if they've not been enhanced in value or changed form while abroad, may be duty-free when imported into the U.S. Proof of manufacturing is required, such as U.S. manufacturer's affidavit. There's other requirements that you would find once you take a look, if you want to click through to on when you get this information for Customs Border Protection.gov, as well as sometimes there's regulations depending on where it's coming from, what type of product it is. And it's the importer of record. The importer of record is required to provide the proof here. If you're using a customs broker can do some things for you, but the importer of record is the one ultimately responsible for a burden of proof here. Country of origin. Now, many of you probably are familiar with country of origin certificates, particularly if you're an importer and an exporter. And the duty rates are based on both the harmonized tariff classification codes from the country of origin on an item. And these rules depend on the country of destination, meaning if they're coming to the US. So substantial transformation is used in 200 countries, and rules of origin under a US free trade agreement are used in other 20 countries. Understanding up front how sourcing requirements can affect eligibility for free trade agreements and determining duty rates based on origin of items in your bill of material is important. It's critical for really setting up your global supply chain. And you may have done this already, you may have experience in it, but it's something you may want to review. The country of origin click-through is helpful, and there is a document that is also going to be shared with you. I think it's about a 9-page document, but this one's pretty straightforward. Most of us will understand this as we read it, but it does take some experience to manage it, and in some cases you may need to get additional help. If you've got other companies that you're familiar with, say in the CAMPS group, that have been doing importing and exporting for a while and they've got experience, don't hesitate to ask them what their best practice or their experience is and how they're doing it, if they've got some help that they can share for you or some tips they can share for you. Duty drawback. Maybe some of you companies are doing duty drawback. It's a unique area that can give you money back for unused or rejected merchandise. An importer has between 3 to 5 years after importation to apply for up to 99% of the U.S. Customs duty paid for a refund if goods are exported or destroyed under Customs and Border Patrol supervision. I did not print this document out. The link is valid if you want to do a control click when you get the document here. But that document that goes over duty drawback is 252 pages. And if you're new to it, it'll take some study on your part. There's others that may have, there may be customs and experts that might help you with this, but I've worked with and been familiar with a number of companies in Washington and Idaho that have been using duty drawback successfully for a number of years. Moving on, customs reconciliation entries allows for the use of best information at the time of entry, and then allows importers to flag estimated elements, knowing that they must provide customs the actual information at a later date. So under the 98.02 status, harmonized tariff codes and foreign trade agreement determinations, you can do a reconciliation entry submission later, and that might benefit you if you can decrease the duties or get a lower valuation. And there is, again, another click through if you want to look at that. And maybe some of you have had experience in this area. Not everybody's perfect, both on the importer and exporters, and since most human beings are fallible, And there's human beings involved in all of our government agencies, including Customs and Border Protection. Sometimes there are mistakes made or entry corrections that need to be done, or you can make a protest. So this is another method that if you are familiar with it, or if you need to go through, you can talk to Customs and Border Patrol. And I think Dino's had some experience doing that. I've had some experience doing it. There's ways to contact the right people, tell them what you're after. They typically want to schedule a time frame, and they typically have a document you need to fill out, or you have to go through a process. But you can engage with them to get information because they are supposed to serve the people doing the importing and the exporting in our country. So don't be afraid to ask questions or learn more, or to be involved if you need to in this area. So now we're talking about additional strategies. But before I start that, Dino, did you have any comments or things that you want to jump in on at this point?
A couple on the duty drawback issue. You just have to bear in mind that duty drawbacks are eligible on products that were initially meant to be imported into the country for sale here in the US. And when you send them back, you have to send them back to the original producer or manufacturer in the same condition or the same product that you originally got them from. And you're only entitled to 90% of the duty that you paid. CBP takes 10% of the actual duty as, I guess, a fee for processing or whatever, but it's 10%. The other comment I'd like to make is that the CBP, actually, you can get internal advice from the CBP. It's really a question of who to talk to and who to reach out to. If you get an inquiry from the CBP, there's usually somebody on that inquiry list that you can reach out to and make an appointment with and talk to. I know I've had clients who have had several really complicated country of origin issues. You can either directly apply for a country of origin certificate, or maybe prior to that reach out to them informally and see if you can get some internal advice. So those are basically the comments I have on those issues. Are
Thank you. Alternative sourcing, look for sourcing opportunities in other countries besides China. That comes up a lot. China is a huge supplier of many things and components that come into the United States. I've spent over 30 years doing business, working and as an international trade specialist in China. I'm fluent in Mandarin. I've worked with the government. I've worked with many small businesses and large businesses. I've also worked with companies in Canada, Mexico, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, India, Hong Kong. We've seen a lot, and there's a lot to be learned, but eventually there may be a need over time. And again, this is a work in progress when it comes to tariffs. It's not everything's out there, and we don't know everything, but I think you'll have to decide as a business what you need to do, but there's ways to get advice and direction in this area. And if you haven't been, or if you're familiar with third-party warehousing, distribution, direct shipping, consider third parties both in the US and at origin to handle pickup, pick and pack, and direct shipping options if it makes sense for your company, the type of products and the distribution you're looking for. I'm going to move on to the next slide. I only have about 3 slides left. Freight consolidation can be helpful depending on what you're doing as an importer and an exporter. There's a lot of good resources on freight consolidation, as well as asking your own importer, exporter freight companies that you're working with. The other additional strategy is set up a wholesale company overseas, create a new company, a wholesaler in the country of origin, allowing you to buy direct from manufacturers, employing the first sale rule and starting a new wholesale business, selling components to others. So that is definitely an opportunity, but it might not be in China. It might be in Taiwan, or it might be in South Korea, or someplace like that. And then here's some common ways, and you probably have seen this. I'm just going to summarize this quickly, but Customs and Border Protection, Customs and Border Patrol for the US, they're going to be hypersensitive to fake certificates of origins, to changes in the harmonized tariff code for imports and exports. They're going to be looking at things coming from China, repackaged that says they're in a different box, but they originated from China, but there was no real added value, but they're still shipped from there. And there's going to be probably companies sanctioned, or there's going to be fines that will be levied. as we move forward for those that are trying to dodge U.S. tariffs. They may use the correct HS code along with repackaging the product, but provide a fake certificate of origin. That's not uncommon. And if you get caught up in this, again, there's fines, and there's also you can be blackballed as an importer if you're not careful. So sometimes the China factory will transship the manufactured item to a facility like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, or Taiwan, and it'll be repackaged, but there was still no real value added. There was nothing really done. And there's a new certificate of origin, which is not valid because it was still made in China. So you have to be careful about those. You may have other experiences and you may have seen this. You may be involved in experiencing this yourself. So just be aware. Customs and Border Protection for the United States is sensitive to this. And you want to try to stay in your lane appropriately on these situations. And you want to look at your suppliers and understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I will reiterate what Vern just said there, because probably in May of this year, the federal prosecutors in the criminal division of justice have been given instructions to meticulously track and prosecute parties attempting to evade tariffs. They bolstered their whistleblower program because they want to encourage increased prosecutions. They focus on misclassification, undervaluation of the goods, as Vern was saying, country of origin misrepresentation, rerouting or transshipments, tampering with the tracking data. We've seen some of that, and then efforts to conceal or manipulate records. In addition to the civil penalties, there are criminal penalties. The civil penalties multiply the unpaid tariffs, and these penalties can apply to suppliers, brokers, importers, freight forwarders, and downstream U.S. buyers. So just be careful of that. The DOJ is starting to compel importers to reconfirm their product classification, valuation, countries of origin to avoid prosecutions and fines. And basically, they're looking at people trying to get around the tariffs. I've seen things like, as Vern has said, parallel or duplicate commercial invoices, one for a payment and then one for supporting tariffs at a lower cost, opening domestic entities to import shipments at cost and then selling them at regular market prices with a lower tariff cost without substantially transforming the product. That's you bring something in from China, send it to Vietnam or some other place, say the country of origin is from Vietnam, even though nothing has changed from China. We've seen those. These are just kind of things to be worried about, because Customs and Border Patrol is pretty familiar with a lot of these techniques and themes, and they will spot and make people really pay for these things.
Let's go ahead and do question and answer here. Just before we do that, though, I just wanted to make those attending in this webinar help you know that there is a opportunity to participate in the Greater Seattle Export Accelerator program as a manufacturer. If you've been doing exports, you can apply by the end of workday, September 8th. You can use this link. This is a program that is no cost to businesses that are exporting to decrease risk and increase value in your market opportunities in foreign markets. And I'll have Kurt Davis send more information out about that. But I see in the chat box, there's a number of questions coming out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll go ahead and see. Kirk, if you're hosting, do you see the chat box?
Yes, in fact, yeah, there's some recent comments, and Dino's done a good job of addressing some of the comments in there. So yes, I've been watching that. Gregory made an interesting comment about the steel that was being shipped through Vietnam from China in the past to avoid the tariffs, but how maybe that's changing now with enforcement. So
It is changing now, and everybody's getting hit with a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum. And the way they're calculating those tariffs is pretty interesting. It's the value of the product and then determining the percentage of steel and aluminum in that product, and then levying the tariffs on that percentage, and the rest of the product may be subject to other tariffs as well. It gets a little complicated.
Yeah, thank you. And Dino, you've done such a great job of addressing the comments in there. So I don't know if people have other questions, but you did offer that you and Vern would be available if people wanted to reach out individually
Absolutely.
to address some of these issues. So I'll make certain in the information that I sent out, Vern, that I'll put both of your contact information in there.
And yeah, and the answer to the question about the slide deck is yes.
Yeah.
We are we're happy to share the slide deck.
And there'll be documents associated with the topics that we discussed that are for your reference if you wish to keep them.
Yeah.
I'm going to quickly answer David Higgs. It's H-E-G. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Dino and I are experienced trade in international trade. We're not government officials. It's left up to the courts what they want to do about the international emergency economic powers that Trump has used for fentanyl and for some of the reciprocal tariffs. If there isn't a repeal, I don't know what will happen to monies that have been collected. I don't know if there will be a change. We just know that it's a pretty fragmented approach. Not all countries have got their tariffs solidified or put in there. So it's a work in progress. For some, it may feel like you're being drugged through the briar patch and you've got scratches you didn't intend on. And you may even be bleeding a little bit. But
Yeah.
so we recognize this. I work with a lot of businesses in a lot of different industry sectors, and so does Dino. And we are assisting them as best we can and sharing what our experience is. But there is no immediate solution to any of this that we have power to do other than managing what we do as a business.
Vern, is it okay if I ask those who are in attendance and I'm picking on Randy King and maybe Jake or Joe they're in the middle, they're having experiences. Mark, maybe you're having experience with this, but would you share some of your experiences with tariffs lately? What's happening from your point of view? Randy, go ahead.
I just paid 58% on a container load out of China that would have cost a few $1,000s a few years ago, cost me 18,000 in tariffs on that container. And I'm cost averaging to absorb what I can, but my prices are going up, but not at, I haven't built the full costing in. But one of my key vendors has actually opened a second factory in Vietnam, and we've shifted all of that product from China to Vietnam. But I'm looking at this and wondering why I don't know, open a factory in Canada, ship product from China to Canada, repurpose it there, and then ship it into the US and have a 55% cost advantage over what I have now. It seems like totally counterproductive as a small manufacturer to try to compete.
Randy, it's a real burden. You've summarized it well. You're caught between a rock and a hard place, but you're still trying to make product.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the problem, Randy, is the cost of creating a manufacturing facility somewhere else is pretty significant for a lot of small producers. We're seeing that.
Sure.
That's the issue here.
I'll just comment there on the Western Integrated Technology. So we're a distributor, so we don't import directly. But the pattern I've seen change recently is that initially it looked like our principals, the people who do the importing, were passing on the dollars of the tariffs, but not the percentages. So if they paid 10,000 on a tariff, they would pass that down the line. But if that was 10%, they didn't pass 10% down the line. Change we're seeing recently, but this was a little bit before the recent, I would say, litigation loss that Trump experienced, was that they were starting to pass down the percentages. In other words, maintaining their gross margins. And that's what's going to really drive inflation. And I was an importer during the 2016 to 19 tariffs. And the pattern there very much on the consumer goods side was to recover your dollars, but don't try and recover your percentages. And that's why we didn't get such extreme inflation then. And it seems like if the tariffs do get preserved, aren't defeated, we are looking, I think, at that going forward, much larger inflation on the supply side.
Yeah, and the problem, Joe, is that even if a new administration comes in and tries to change those tariffs, it's gonna be a while. It's not going to be an instant kind of.
It didn't change anything, by the way. We were just waiting for him to reverse. He kept it all. I don't think that would happen again, but that was a surprise.
Yeah.
Good comments, Joe. Thank you. Anybody else want to make comments? You're free to do. This topic has a lot of aspects, a lot of elements that you have to deal with. And we appreciate you of the fact that we get to be with you for a few minutes and talk about it.
Jake?
I saw a comment from Suzanne, who I know Suzanne is an experienced trade lawyer, and that renegotiation of the USMCA is going to be really important because that USMCA expires fairly soon. So they're going to have to create a new trade agreement. And we'll just see exactly how that works and if it's going to exempt a lot of tariffs or not. So very good comment, Suzanne. Thank you. And by the way, Suzanne is also a Boston College alumni like I am.
Yeah, and Suzanne is a member of camps, and would certainly like you to get to know Suzanne. And so and I've known Vern for 15 years, watching him do this amazing work. I don't know anybody who works harder than Vern, maybe Dino, but Vern's working very hard on this stuff. This is a great opportunity. Jake, did you want to mention something about tariffs? I don't know if you're seeing something on your side.
Yeah, our impact has actually not been significant. We're paying a little bit of higher dollars for steel, obviously, but we're able to pass those along. We don't import directly, so we're sourcing everything from domestic suppliers. So we don't have to deal with the headache, just the additional costs. We develop proprietary materials, and a lot of those inputs are domestic products anyway, and that part has not impacted us. We compete against Invar, which is a really expensive metal alloy, with nickel being a large component of that, and a lot of the raw goods coming out of the Russia-Ukraine region. So we've seen prices skyrocket, and just on the base materials plus the tariffs on top of that, which arguably could help us. But in general, the tariff strategy, I think, is stupid and wrong. But from us directly, it hasn't significantly impacted our business.
That's interesting. Interesting to hear. It's interesting to hear that. Very good. Gregory, you
I
wanted
think
to
Gregory wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I have an interesting seat in this situation as the owner of a regional M&A firm. And we have clients that are importers. We have clients that are manufactured imported components, and we have domestic manufacturers. And I recognize for some of those segments the cost and strategic planning and execution necessary. But we also got to recognize, as an advocate, for example, for the Washington wine industry and Oregon wine industries, that they, for their margins and their possibility of competing favorably, they shouldn't on their home field be at a competitive disadvantage against Australia, South America, Europe, etc. And we're also seeing significant investment into U.S. manufacturing plants, which is good for real estate employment, tax collection, etc. I'd be curious, maybe Dino's comments. I do a lot of business with Miller Nash and your team in the M&A sector on kind of those overall arching. Is it a short-term pain for a better long-term gain for us economically as we develop a domestic manufacturing sector? I know, again, going to the Washington wine industry, for them to take medal winning wines and have them on the shelf in France has historically been extremely problematic, yet France has gotten access to our robust marketplace.
Yeah, George, good question. I think there has to be a balanced approach here, because you are correct. The Washington wine industry tries to export a lot of their wines elsewhere, and there has to be some sort of trade balance between the two partners, right? If we are getting levied a significant amount by importing wines to Europe, then that's a consideration that has to be made on the kind of tariffs that are being levied on those countries here. So it's a tightrope that you have to walk, because you want to be able to sell over there, but you want to be able to also sell over here. So I think what's really important is to get a lot of these trade agreements in place so that both jurisdictions are comfortable with where they're at as far as reciprocal tariffs are concerned. It's a hard one, It's a hard one, Greg, because those countries are going to say you have the economic power, so we can't actually pay those tariffs. But then we'll come back and say we want to be able to do business with you guys, but we can't because you guys are tariffing us too much. I don't know. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to talk about. It's a hard one to figure out. So,
Gregory, if you want to reach out to me later on, I've worked with a number of wineries in Washington State in foreign markets and have been involved in a number of outbound trade events, as well as a number of the wineries that I've worked with have been involved in our Greater Sale Export Accelerator program. We're in our fourth cohort, third year. Again, if you guys want to apply and want to be part of that, you can make application online by September 8th. And it is a no-cost program because we were able to fund it without having to charge you guys anything.
Amazing.
No, that's great. As I said, we're a mergers and acquisition firm who does a lot in the manufacturing sector. We hear it from both sides in this situation. People who are paying more for component parts that they need from overseas, the furniture industry. There's nothing manufactured in furniture domestically right now, and they are getting killed right now by tariffs and bringing in products. So we hear from a spectrum. It's made an interesting world.
It's still in change and in flux. We don't know how it's going to end up, but the next 12 months should be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, David, I'll just mention thank you for your comments, and you're feeling the pain and you felt the pain. Appreciate your insights on that. And I want to just say that this has been a very successful event, but we probably need to close it up and get everybody to lunch. But I will be sending out the PDFs and the presentation. I really can't thank Vern and Dino enough for how information rich, but also hearing the pain. Randy, you took the prize for the most pain talked about today. I'm looking for things that camps can do like this to help our companies. So hopefully this will help start that conversation, and these strategies that you guys gave, I think, are something we can talk about.
Thank you so much, Kirk. We appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. It was a short presentation.
You had to hit the tops of the waves, right? There's too much.
We tried to.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
You too. Take care. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.